wrestling gave me the perseverance, the confidence, and the mental toughness to know I'd always be okay.
We can endure anything and adapt and pivot and change. Wrestling gave us that ability.
I would say nothing in life has impacted me more than the things wrestling has taught me in terms of self-reflection, resilience.
Toughness. Some guys have it, some guys don't.
Adversity, 100%. How to pick myself up and be a man after I failed.
And everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling.
For me, wrestling saved my life because it allowed me to focus and channel my energy.
We're fortunate if you wrestled, because if you wrestled, natural talent helps, but it's 5% of the ingredient. It pales in comparison to heart and technique and effort.
It humbled me, taught me humility. Nothing can humble you more than wrestling. I think it's the learning to adapt, right? You learn how to adapt, you learn how to solve problems.
You know, if I look back at my time I spent wrestling, if it gave me one thing more than anything else, it's mental toughness.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Wrestling Changed My Life podcast. This is your host, Ryan Warner. I'm recording this intro on my AirPods, so forgive if the audio is different from what you're used to. Our guests today are Jeremy Bailer and Ben Hatta, former roommates, best friends, and teammates at the University of Pennsylvania during the 90s. Jeremy went on to have a career on Wall Street as a trader. Ben worked in production out in Los Angeles. But most recently, they've been involved in producing some really awesome wrestling documentaries, one of which is Team Foxcatcher, which was on the late, great Dave Schultz. It was on Netflix. Amazing documentary. And now they've been working on it for a while, but there's a documentary coming out on Sunday on A&E on Kurt Angle called Angle, and they were executive producers in that film as well, tying together to the WWE with the amateur wrestling stuff. So these guys have been on the cusp of one, really well-known documentary and one that's coming out on Sunday. So I really hope you enjoy it. Fan of the week goes to our friend Gopher ZXG. 5-star review, inspirational stories. Thank you so much for leaving the review, and thanks to everyone who's left reviews for this podcast. On Apple Podcasts, we have the most reviews of any wrestling podcast, and it's all because of you folks listening, so thank you very much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Now, without further ado, let's get to this interview with Jeremy Bailer and Ben Hatta. Last but not least, folks, this episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens. Athletic Greens is your nutritional cheat code. Pour 1 pack of Athletic Greens into a glass of water, mix it up, slam it down, and you have your daily allotment of vitamins, minerals, and superfoods. You can now, through Wrestling Changed My Life, through this awesome offer, go to athleticgreens.com/WCML, get a 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs. athleticgreens.com/WCML, 1-year supply of vitamin D droplets and 5 free travel packs. Ben Hatta, Jeremy Bailer, welcome to the Wrestling Changed My Life podcast.
Thank you for having us. Good to be here, buddy. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's so fun to have you guys on. You got a big project that's going live. Going live to the public in one form this weekend. And if anyone listening has watched the Netflix documentary Team Foxcatcher, these guys are intimately involved, and we're going to get into that. Let's just start with you, Ben. How did you guys get to this project of working on a Kurt Angle documentary?
Well, it actually spun off of Team Foxcatcher, the production company who saw our film and thought we did a really good job and enjoyed it, reached out to us, and we're working with a first-time director named Alex Perry, and he's a friend of Kurt's, and he had worked with Kurt before. And obviously Kurt has tied Team Foxcatcher and to the Dave Schultz Wrestling Club. And so they wanted to do a piece about that and tie some of that in there. And so they reached out to us and asked if we would, be a part of it.
And it's coming out this weekend in its first form?
Yeah, it comes out on Sunday on A&E at 8 p.m. They're doing a Legends of the WWE biographies.
Man, that is so cool. And so, Jeremy, when you look at Kurt Angle, in the wrestling world, we know him from '96. Of course, everyone knows him from WWE. But talk us through the process of once you get that phone call to get involved, what steps are you guys taking? And, whether it's doing interviews and to how we got to this point.
Yeah, a lot of the road was paved because our director had a tight relationship with Kurt. He was kind of a Kurt super fan. So he had done interviews with him in the past, and then just decided he wanted to do this project, started building it up, got to the point where he had to do a lot of the amateur wrestling and a lot of the Team Foxcatcher stuff. And that's kind of where, Ben and I came in as, college wrestlers at the University of Pennsylvania. Team Foxcatcher is right in our backyard. Obviously, we did the Team Foxcatcher documentary. And they liked the way we do it. So that's kind of how we all came together and started out working on this project, but it's been a good ride.
And how long ago did that whole process take place?
I'd say
in 2018.
3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, it was delayed a little bit because of COVID, but yeah, we started in 2018.
It is just crazy to see how long it takes to get something, really tight and really clean. And you guys have been through that with Team Foxcatcher. And so, it's just amazing that gentlemen like you are helping create these stories that involve wrestlers. And I know we've had some conversations off air about some of the efforts you're doing there, but let's go back to the beginning, Ben. How did you and Jeremy meet?
We met our senior year in college. We were on the same recruiting trip at the University of Pennsylvania. And then we were at the high school national tournament, and we met there again once we knew we were going to Penn. And Coach Reina put us together as roommates. So we were freshman roommates, and then we've been roommates. Well, we were roommates all through college, and then best friends ever since.
No one better than Coach Roger Reina. That's a guy you talk to, you just feel good about yourself for hours afterwards.
Yeah, it's good to have him back in the program. He took a little stint off of college wrestling for a while, and then got sucked back in. But he's in a good spot now. He's got the team in a very good position. Got a lot of young, good talent on the squad, and starting to make a little noise.
Yeah, that they call it the ecosystem, but Philly's got something going right now. You got Beat the Streets, you got the Drexel guys across the road, you got Reina back in town, and then the RTC. Man, it's exciting.
It's unique, not a lot of programs have that at their disposal, right? Not to mention the quality of the University of Pennsylvania for academics, but you got a good outlet in the PRTC. You got Beat the Streets to give back to the community and help the kids out in the Philly area, all working together with Drexel. It's a great situation to have. Now you got Jordan Burroughs at the PRTC. You got a lot of high level athletes with Mark Hall there, and obviously headed up there by Brandon Slay.
Man, we know Brandon on this podcast. He's been a guest, and he's been a subject of a documentary, and just an awesome guy, amazing story. Now, when you guys were going to Penn, Jeremy, how influential was Foxcatcher in and around the Penn program during that time?
I mean, it was the reason, and I can speak for myself. I can't speak for Ben, but it was the reason why we went there. That was the main factor for me. I didn't really know too much about the University of Pennsylvania and how distinguished it was with the Wharton School of Business and all that it has going for it academically. But I did know about Team Foxcatcher and the ability to work out and be coached by and mentored by the athletes of Team Foxcatcher. So, I mean, we were in and out of there all the time, and they were in and out of our wrestling room all the time. Obviously, as you know, Dave Schultz was one of the guys who came in a lot and worked with us. And obviously, you know what happened if you watch Team Foxcatcher.
Yeah, and the funeral was held at the Palestra, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and our three assistant coaches were Foxcatcher members, Dan Shade and Trevor Lewis and Brian Dolph. So they lived on the farm, and then they would come after school for practice. So it really it was an RTC before the RTCs. I mean, they moved the Olympic Training Center to Foxcatcher at that point. So it was like having that in our backyard every Saturday. We'd all pile up in Jeremy's brother's Pathfinder and head out over to the farm and get a good practice in, and get our butts kicked. But it was great.
Now, were you guys allowed to like hang out and sleep over, or was that for like resident athletes only at the time?
I stayed there with the Schultzes when I was with my dad, maybe the year before, when I went and checked out the campus and the school and all that, and was taking it seriously at that time. But I mean, if you didn't know one of the wrestlers, then you weren't just, it wasn't like a sleepover camp. I don't know if you'd want to stay there too.
And Ben, your knowledge or knowing of the Schultz family stems from your father, who was not randomly, ironically, was a guest last Monday. Tell us about your experience with the Schultzes growing up.
Dave and Nancy, so it was probably 83 or 84 before they were training for Los Angeles, when we'd go every summer out to Colorado Springs to the training camp. So my dad and mom would pack up the family station wagon, and we'd, Clark Griswold it out, and we'd stay in the dorms and on the housing, and they would put us in the kind of like a trailer basically, and we'd share it with another wrestling family, and it happened to be the Schultzes. And so Nancy, she was Dave's wife at the time, and she would babysit us, my brother, my sister, and I. And so, when my dad and Dave would come back from working out, we all just shared this big sort of like double wide kind of trailer that they put us in. So I knew him when I was young. When he won the Olympics, my brother brought him in for show and tell at our school with the gold medal. So that was a big part of me going to Penn when I went on my recruiting trip, he went rock climbing with Coach Reina and I in Valley Forge. And so I think that really sealed the deal for me, is that I kind of had someone there that, could look after me, knew my family, felt like an uncle, and it felt like everyone, probably felt that he was like he was his uncle. But yeah, I think that was, I just texted with Nancy today about the film coming out. So, I think they've been an instrumental part of me getting out to Penn for sure.
Yeah, and I know we're here to talk about the Kurt film coming out, but just all this just paid such a beautiful backdrop of how this all happened, because you have this intimate knowledge with the family. You and Jeremy wrestle at Penn, and you're there when the tragedy happens. And then just to kind of bring people up to speed, Ben, talk about your career in film after graduating.
So after graduating, I moved out to LA and just sort of on a wing and a prayer, and slept on a fellow wrestler's couch for a couple of weeks in Venice Beach, and really just dove headfirst into the entertainment industry. I started at a talent agency at CAA. I was an assistant there. I ended up working for 2 vice presidents at ABC. And this was all in sort of the reality television sort of realm, but it wasn't reality television back then. This is in 98, 99. And then in like 2000, when I was at ABC, is when the reality boom just started hitting. And we had Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Whose Line Is It Anyway, The Mole, Making the Band, and a bunch of other stuff. And that's when Survivor and Big Brother were just launching. And then I met an executive producer, and I went and worked in development with him. His name was Mike Fleiss, and he created The Bachelor and a show called High School Reunion. And so I started working on those. And then that was really when reality television was kind of, exploding. So I just kind of worked my way up the ladder on a bunch of different shows. And, once I got sort of grounded in that, Jeremy and I met back up, and that's when Foxcatcher started coming about. And I realized that, what we do in reality is not too far of an offshoot from what, documentarians are doing. And I think that we could team up and, get the story told. So that's how I've kind of transitioned into sort of both arenas.
And Jeremy, what are you thinking when you're seeing your roommate, your best friend, and he's doing all these crazy travels for the Amazing Race? Were you intrigued, or were you like not surprised?
Well, a little both. I was definitely jealous. He Ben went and followed his dream and went and did what he wanted to. Ben and I are both creative guys, and coming out of UPenn, you kind of get forced into kind of the finance world a little bit. And I know a lot of wrestlers do get involved in finance. Not a lot go into production, and not a lot go into the entertainment world. We're starting to find that out now that there's a lot more out there. But I went that finance route. I went into trading, and right out of school, I followed my brother, who was also a Penn wrestler, Josh. Went out to Chicago, started trading options on the Chicago Board of Trade, Chicago Mercantile Exchange, out there for a company called Wolverine Trading. And then from there, Josh and I came back to New York and started our own trading company. And I've been in it for a while, but I was always had the itch, right? I always had the creative itch to be in the same entertainment business Ben was in, and got lucky enough. Ben had been working with a friend out there, and he was putting together a film, and he gave me a buzz and said, "Listen, I know you want to get into this industry. What do you think about maybe raising some money or kind of investing in a film and try to work in that way?" And I thought about it, and I'm like, "Yeah, all right, let's do it. Let's go." And that's how I kind of started to get into the business. And then obviously it's kind of snowballed into more relevant projects for us in wrestling. And I got to team up with Ben on a bunch of these, and we're hoping to produce a lot more content coming up.
It's so awesome to have you guys in this space. And I mean, I didn't realize you started your own business though. What was that like, jumping off the cliff and kind of cutting the rope?
Yeah, that is quite a jump. I have an entrepreneurial spirit, and figured out at one point when we were trading options that, these guys are making a lot of money, and why can't we just do this on our own? My brother was the guy who kind of inspired me to do it. I'm a little bit more risk averse than my brother, but he knew that I had the brain to figure out how to make it all work, and he was right. And we put it together and started our own company in New York. So that was a pretty fun time.
I'm so intrigued by both worlds. Ben, more recently than my creative side and the production side, and going that route, and then also my day jobs in tech sales, as people are probably sick to death of hearing about in this podcast. So the business side intrigues me as well.
Yeah, it was always one of those things too that when Jer and I were leaving college, we always thought about just doing something creative, making a film, making a movie, making a television show or something. But I always called him, and like, you got to get out here. You got to get out here. This is where you belong. So finally we were able to, make that connection and, come together with a project that we both knew very well, and a great story. And what was great too is that it was coming out from multiple angles. There was a feature film being made, by Bennett Miller. So it was, we weren't the only ones that recognized that it was, just a fantastic story.
Jeremy was saying, "I'd love to, but we're getting paid out here right now."
That was his response. His was trying to get me out to the other side, saying,
"We're
"Come
getting
on, man,
paid.
We want you to work." Yeah, come work for Bailer Trading.
Exactly, man. Both are awesome, and let's just kind of shift into Team Foxcatcher. So, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's an amazing movie. The feature film I didn't love, I'll be honest. I thought the Prince of Pennsylvania, the one ESPN did, was good, but too much focus on the bad guy. And I like that this one really highlights the culture and the wrestling that was going on out there. So, like, again, what stage of the project was this in when you guys got brought in?
We got brought in. It's funny because I saw that Bennett Miller was making the feature film, and I called my dad, and I was like, "Hey, do you know that this was going on?" And they had already reached out to him. And he was like, "Yeah, but Nancy's making a documentary, and so you should call her." And so that's when I called her, and they were probably a few months along. They already had the director on board, and then when I asked her, I was like, "What do you need? What help? How can I help?" First thing she said was, "We need money." So we did what we knew best, was we reached out to the people who knew that story, who knew Dave, and who were in a position to, help finance the film. And a lot of them were Penn wrestlers, the Modders and, Ed McBride. And we had a bunch of guys that came, and stepped up, and we're like, "Yeah, let's get this story told," and so we did. And, I think that's kind of been the formula that we've used, even for Angle, which was, we were brought in at the very beginning stages, but again, we were asked to finance the film. So again, our first instinct was, okay, who knows the story, who was a fan of our last film, and who knows wrestling and wants a wrestling story told well. Mm-hmm. So again, we dipped back into that sort of circle of wrestlers who wanted to help, and we were able to do that. So we came in at the financing stage, and then carried on through the production and all the way through to the sales and all that too.
Jeremy, what's it like to get a film cleared to go on Netflix in terms of getting all the archival checked off, everything, the I's dotted, the T's crossed? Is that a bear of a task?
It's a process, that is not our particular forte. There's definitely guys that we bring along to take care of all the licensing, make sure it's all buttoned up. But yeah, you do have to make sure that everything is tied up and taken care of. Because the last thing you want to do is have a lawsuit and then have a little kind of barrier to getting your good picture to market. So there's a lot of moving parts of production, and that's one of the reasons why Ben and I wanted to be on here and make sure that we get the message out about making better wrestling films, making content for people out there. Like we want to start something on our own and get something going.
Yeah, let's just talk about that. So basically, and you guys can fill me in here, you're looking to say, hey, there's a lot of great wrestling stories. You guys have expertise. There's people out there in Hollywood, like the Mark Grosses of the world that's been on this podcast, who have expertise, and you guys are looking to form a coalition, so to speak. And I hope I didn't butcher that too bad. Ben, how would you put it?
Yeah, I mean, just like, there's wrestlers in business, there's a lot of guys like Jeremy was talking about who have that, sports background and have gone into sales or have gone into finance. There is a select group of guys who have a wrestling background who are also in entertainment. Like you mentioned, Mark Gross. I think you also had Greg Warren on, who's a stand-up comedian, but obviously we know the big names like Chris Pratt and, Tom Cruise and the Baldwins and Vince Vaughn and, Neil deGrasse Tyson. But there's a bunch of other guys that are out there who are executive producers. I know the executive producer from How I Married Your Mother was a wrestler at Shaker Heights. And so it's trying to find these guys, bringing them together. And I've already been hit up for a couple of other wrestling projects that are in the works right now that are great stories that need to be told, but Jeremy and I feel that they need to be told well. The last thing we want to see is a great wrestling story, get put out and it's not put out to its best abilities. That's the first chance that the audience is going to get to see it. And our overall mission is to really just broaden the reach of our audience of, the sport, bring these great stories that people have never heard in the sport of wrestling to a broader audience. And I think we did that with Team Foxcatcher. It's not just the wrestling story, but you've got this whole other, murder and this billionaire kind of, going down this path side that brought a whole different kind of audience in. And with Angle, you've got the wrestling side, but you've got this pro wrestling side, but then you've also got this big drug addiction side, which opens us up to this whole other human element side of storytelling. So, our goal is to create a group where we can help each other make these films, and I'll let Jeremy speak more to the financing when we get there, but that's also another goal of ours too, Jerry?
Yeah, I mean, it's just your podcast is titled exactly how we want everyone to perceive what we're doing. Wrestling changed my life. I'm sure wrestling changed Ben's life, and I don't know any wrestler that wouldn't say the same. In some way, shape, or form, wrestling has changed their life, and we want to amplify that message through entertainment, whether it be a film, a podcast, a TV series, whatever it is, any form of art or entertainment. We want to bring a lot more people together that can lend a hand in whatever their expertise may be. Now, Ben and I kind of already formed a kind of wrestling group, a wrestlers and entertainment group with proof of concept of Team Foxcatcher and Angle. So Ben and I, we have different experiences. We have different expertises. Ben is much more on the creative and production side, and I came from more of a finance background. So when you put those two pieces together, you have the ability to raise money, you have the ability to work with legal and accounting, plus you have the ability to produce films and create content. And then when you when you start developing the relationships that we have on different coasts, as well as throughout the wrestling community, there's a lot of different people out there. There's lawyers, there's accountants, there's production assistants, there's producers, there's exec producers, there's agents. If we can pool all of our resources together and help out a young producer who might be producing a great film, may have a great idea, but he doesn't have any money, but he doesn't know what to do or how to get an interview with a certain guy, or he doesn't have an agent. If we could pool all these people together, we can be an outlet for all these people to create great content. And that's kind of the idea behind, our idea of wrestlers and entertainment.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of networking, of consulting and mentoring, and, hopefully staffing, so if there are future, wrestlers out there that, have the dream of getting in the entertainment industry of some way, that there is an outlet there or a resource where, people are like, oh yeah, I'd bring you on as an intern, or yeah, we're looking for people, and then eventually we want to get to what we've done with our films financing wise is, tap into those other branches in our world of, the wrestlers in business, the Beat the Streets, the Rudises, the Flows, the UWWs, USA Wrestling, all those arms that can help bring a film together as well, and we financed our film all through wrestlers. Why not bring more wrestlers in who want to see more films get made and help finance those and help, bring these projects together? It just, I think that's where we've seen the inspiration from these other groups, and we're like, well, why can't we just broaden our group out? And that's why I think we reached out to you, because you're doing the same thing, And
it's awesome to be talking with you guys about it. And that's a call out to anyone listening. If you have skills, if you're in Hollywood, if you're making films, shoot me a message, shoot these guys a message, and we'll get everyone in touch, because I think the goal is just to make awesome wrestling content, which, that's one of the best ways to grow the sport. We saw what happened with Formula One with their Netflix series, which I've said this to you guys, but you'll be out and about on a Saturday and people who've never even heard of Formula One until the show are now fans. And the same thing can happen with wrestling.
Yeah. If you look at Fox, Team Foxcatcher, we were nominated for an Emmy. I'm not tooting any horns, but I'm not sure of how many wrestling films were nominated for any awards.
Right.
We've all got Vision Quest to fall back on, but hopefully we can make some better ones, and not even just documentaries, scripted films as well. Obviously your podcast is spinning off into documentaries, but some of those stories would be great feature films as well too. And even the actual Foxcatcher movie that was brought together by a lot of wrestlers. My dad was consultant, John Jura was consultant. They hired a bunch of college and ex-wrestlers to act as extras and to train, Channing Tatum and Mark Ruffalo. And Mark Ruffalo was a high school wrestler, so sort of reaching out to those worlds and sort of, bringing us together and creating a network in a group that, you might not find a lot of us, so strength in numbers. And we all know that grind, like Jeremy said, how wrestling changed their life. We all know that grind. And, if you can combine that with creativity and skill, then you're going to create a good product.
Yeah, Jesse Jansen told me that when he was helping with that film, he had agreed to have them set up like a trading desk at a local office so that he could consult on the film and then continue with his trading jobs. Like that was really a lot of wrestlers involved in that behind the scenes.
Yeah, I remember they made Yoshi shave his hairline to meet the Japanese guy that Dave wrestled in the finals.
Wow,
he had to walk around with that for a couple of weeks.
So when you guys, got the call to work on Angle, you did your role in helping fundraise and helping get access to some of the amateur wrestling stuff that, like you said, someone in pro wrestling would never even know about, frankly. Yeah. I'm just curious, Jeremy, how much, if any, control do you guys get on like story and editing and that kind of thing? Or is that done by the time you're there?
We had a hand in all of it, but obviously that's driven by the vision of our director. He had a good outline, and we were with him along the way to help him with the fork in the road if he's having trouble one way or the other. But just what you said, access to guys like Bruce Baumgartner and Kenny Monday and Kendall Cross, the late Greg Strobel. we gave them access to all these guys. We went out to the U.S. Open and were able to interview with all these guys. Bruce is a big part of USA Wrestling, and they were a big part of helping out as well with the film. So, big thank you to all those guys. But it's a lot of things coming together, and we were able to create that access for our young director and help guide him on a lot of the Olympic wrestling throughout the film. But also creatively, Ben and I had a big hand in a lot of the way things went, and we had a great director, first time guy, and he was very animated, very passionate about what he did, and we thought he did an excellent job.
Yeah, and as Jeremy said with the creative, that was another part where it helped that we were wrestlers, because these guys, when they were cutting these matches, had no idea sometimes in how the match played out, because sometimes they were referees' decisions, or they were moves that they didn't understand. How did that guy score that move? So they would cut these matches together, and you'd hear this interview commentary, and you'd be like, that's not what's happening, what you're seeing, this is what's happening. So we would either change what the person was saying, or we would change the video to match, and then it was also, how do you tell a 6-minute, 7-minute, boring match and get it into 30 seconds where it feels dramatic enough to, so that also came into play when it was, how do we cut these matches to pace them properly so they're, energetic and fun to watch. So anytime that there was anything that had to do with amateur wrestling, they always would consult us, especially when it came to Foxcatcher too, because that was obviously, a big part of our story. But, is it going too far? Is this, what really happened? And helping them find the footage. We were always making phone calls to the guys from Foxcatcher from back in the day to get that old footage, to get access to that. So yeah, I think we were helpful in that sense. And then when it came to the WWE side, they had all those connections themselves. So it really balanced that film out.
When you make stuff like that, it just reminds you how difficult it is for people to follow wrestling if you don't know what's going on sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, there was there were some times where we had to have them explain a move so the audience knew what the scoring was or why he felt the way he did,
Yeah, just going from collegiate wrestling to freestyle is a dramatic change in scoring, and then trying to explain to someone what the clinch is. It's just like, and then the rules change an awful lot. So, it is a little bit of an art to try to get that match down and to have it watchable and understandable for a wider audience that may not fully understand scoring in the sport of wrestling.
And I didn't even know this. I'll say I've never watched Kurt Angle's Olympic final match, but his match, Jeremy, came down to a referee's decision. Like an actual referee just deciding, no criteria, nothing.
I tell you what, it was my all-time favorite match. Ben and I were there to watch it in person.
Whoa!
It was amazing. That was one of the best experiences I've ever been a part of watching wrestling. Referee's decision. The Iranian Jadidi was trying to raise his own hand at the end. And then the ref was struggling to keep his arm down. And then he raised Kurt's hand, and it was just an amazing. I felt for Kurt. It was one of the best things I've ever seen.
Wow. Ben, you were there too. 96. I mean, so many things are flashing in my mind because obviously Kurt Angle, but also you have the breakthrough of Satia that year. Do you remember watching him versus Kenny Monday by chance? It's kind of a remote match, but that was one of his breakout tournaments, that 96 Olympics.
Yeah, I didn't know who he was because it was his breakout, but obviously any match that Kenny was wrestling, we were all there. It was, I think, maybe 10 or 11 of us from Penn made the journey down. Brett and Slay and I were training with the team in Chattanooga the 2 weeks before the Olympics. So it was, and it was in Atlanta. It was on our home turf. So it was fantastic. And to relive it and see that footage and, put yourself back in that small arena through this film was very nostalgic.
What a year to go. My Lord. That's a great team and a lot of great names on that team. So just take us through for the Angle doc this Sunday. Where can they watch it? And then what's happening a year out, if you guys can say, with that film?
Yeah, so A&E is going to show the biography, Angle's biography, on at 8 p.m. on Sunday Eastern time. I think this is the fourth biography they're putting on. They have a slate of them, and after that, Kurt really wanted a little bit more of his full story told. So what you're going to see, they're both great pieces. And it's great that we were able to sell the film to the WWE, because then they can add a lot more of his pro wrestling experience and his pro wrestling to the film, which, we didn't really have access to. But Kurt also wanted to show his family side and his Olympic wrestling side as well, which, because of commercial breaks and made for TV, the film had to be altered a little bit. So you're not going to see, they're going to be two separate pieces, both telling Kurt's story. One a little bit more WWE heavy coming up on Sunday, which I got to tell you, I was a WWE fan, so I kind of like it.
Yeah.
But I also like seeing the family aspect. I'm a family guy. Kurt was a big family guy, and you'll get to see a lot more about his upbringing and, his brothers, his sister, and his parents. And you'll also get to see a little bit more of his struggles after wrestling, which he was a big proponent to make sure he's telling his real story. So we're glad, the time frame for when our full feature will be able to be seen is not really known yet.
Okay.
It will be sometime after it runs its course on A&E, and then pushed to another network. And we don't really fully know which one it's going to be yet. But you will be able to see the film that we made with Kurt's blessing in its full entirety as a feature film on another streaming network at some point.
That'll be on Peacock coming out. A&E will release their version of our film, and then our actual film will be released on Peacock within the year after that.
Exciting. Awesome. Now, can you talk about, Ben, the other project you're working on? Your home?
Yeah, actually.
Home ground?
Yes. So my third wrestling doc is about the high school wrestling rivalry that took place in the state of Ohio, Northeast Ohio, during the 90s between St. Edward's and Walsh Jesuit. And it was during that time that those two schools battled for the national title every year, and were ranked in the top 1 and 2 every year. And there was just the people that came out of there, the Marcus Malakas, the Alan Freeze, the Rick Heps, the Joe Heskets, Andy Rovats, Gray Maynard, Nick Nemeth, Ryan Bertine. It was just Clint Musser. It was just these two armies going at it, and it's really a war story. It's really a story of the 90s, and it's a wrestling story. It's about an empire that was created by this legendary coach Howard Ferguson, who then had a heart attack and died, randomly. And this young, military Marine, ex-Marine Coach Urbis had to take over. And but before he died, Coach Ferguson gave a young Bill Barger, who was starting up at Walsh Jesuit, sort of the playbook to how to create a dynasty. And so he went off and did it, and he created the North Akron Wrestling Club and funneled all these kids into the same school. And we were off to war, and it was a battle. We had 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 fans at our dual meets. ESPN showed up 3 times. This was before Blair really started stepping onto the scene and crushing everyone. But in that time period, in that decade, that 10-year war, it really was, sort of the center of the wrestling high school universe. And so I want to tell that story, and I want to get it out there. And so we're going out and we're filming that in a couple days, August 1st. And we're doing the same thing. We're trying to finance the film from the wrestling community. We're still looking to finish that fundraising. And we're going to make it a great film that appeals to a broader audience, but can still relate to the wrestling world and introduce that to them. So that's the next project.
That's a great hook. You've got me so excited to watch it. I can't wait to see it all come out, because all you hear is that Walsh was just these just scary, intimidating dudes, Tony Marchetti slamming people. And then you had this great dynasty in St. Ed's. And man, I got the chills just hearing you talk about it. So that's going to be great. And did you say when that would be coming out, or is it way too early to tell?
Well, I've been in pre-production for the last 6 to 8 months, and now we're actually filming our 3 rounds of interviews, 3 weeks of interviews, starting in August 1st. And then we're going to come back and we're going to get some other interviews in there with some Olympic coaches to fatten the film up a little bit, and a couple of celebrities, and then hopefully it'll be done by the end of the year, beginning of next year at the latest.
So I'm actually getting ready to do some interviews for a new project coming up here. When you do them, do you do them like 5 in a day, or do you do 1 a day? Like, how do you space it out?
For this project, because I'm doing something that I've never done before, which is I'm taking on a cast of about 50. I'm doing about 4 interviews a day. Yeah, I'm going to try to interview almost the main hitters from all those teams from those 10 years. So we've got like the Roger Chandlers and the Sam Niders and the Eddie James and the Mark Janes, and all those guys are all lined up along with the ones I mentioned before. So it's really going to be a detailed story, but I'm aiming for 4 interviews a day, sometimes 5, but for the majority 4, and then the rest is B-roll.
That's a lot of prep. That's a lot of attention to stay focused that long. And Jeremy, are you working on this one as well?
So, I'm going to be working with Ben as much as I can. Obviously, I do still work in the finance world, but that's where I can help Ben.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about this recently, where I'm gonna help him raise some of that money, and it's another plug for it. So another way wrestlers and entertainment can come together. If any of your listeners are interested in getting involved in funding a wrestling project, definitely have them reach out, because we are looking to round that out a little bit.
And something you guys have mentioned many times when we've spoken, it's an important distinction, is this isn't just donating to donate. This is an investment many times.
Yeah, that's a big distinction to make, because we don't want people to look at us as a charity case just to help us make our passion project. We intend to create quality films that do attract a lot of attention and do return on investment. As proof is, Angle, we returned an 18% investment to our investors. So we want to make quality content. We want to give our guys something to be proud of, a good finished product, and actually make a little bit of money on it.
And we also want to make sure that it gets out there too, that it's sold to a proper, platform. We got Netflix with Team Foxcatcher, and that was also, Emmy nominated. And then you've got Angle, where we're not only getting it out on A&E, but we're getting it out on Peacock. So it's not just making sure that we get our investors' money back, but it's making sure that people see these films, and see them in a space that's as broad as possible.
And I can just tell you from doing the audio docs on here, the story and editing and putting it all together is, to me, the fun and the easy part. I've never had to do this, but finding someone to sell the project to, raise the funds, like that is usually the big barrier to most projects. And it's awesome that you guys are coming to help there. And, if it wasn't for the podcast, we wouldn't have that same kind of distribution platform. So it's like those 2 things you're talking about, the fundraising and the distribution, are that's a mountain that I don't think people realize how big that is most times.
Yeah, it always comes down to the money and raising that money. There's a ton of great stories, there's a ton of great ideas out there. But if you don't have the support, the financial support, you're gonna get stopped at square one. You might be able to create a great film, but if you don't have the money to pay a good producer, pay a good director, pay a good editor, you won't get it off the ground.
Yeah.
And then the other end is the selling too. Like you said, it's the back end. It's like you might have a great product, but you got to get it out there. You got to get it into people's hands. And so having those connections with our other films of, getting it into the right people's hands to watch it and then, hopefully buy it. So that's the goal.
That's the goal. And we're happy to help however we can. Anyone listening, you can reach us on Instagram or any social media platform or reach out to these guys directly. And it's all for a good cause. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I got one question each for each of you, then we'll sign off here.
Got it. Thank you.
Ben, let's just start. This is kind of out of the blue, but it just shows your experience in the industry. Tell us just like one of the crazier tales of like filming The Amazing Race, like the 72-hour no sleep bender you had to go on. Like, what were some of the war stories of filming those projects over the years?
If I can tell that story, I mean, that was in Berlin on season 6 or 7 of The Amazing Race. And teams were flying in, I think from Norway. And when you get on those jobs, it's basically a live show. So you're out the day before scouting, before they get there to make sure everything's set up. And then when they run through and arrive, that day you're set up at one location or another, whether it's, a challenge or a marker or at the airport or at the finish line, but you've got to be there set, and the teams are spread out, over hours, they're not all bunched up together. So you've got to be there when the first person, hours before the first person gets there and hours after the second or after the last person gets there. And then sometimes, and on that race, it ended up being, I think I was up for 36 hours on that run. But then one of our producers got sick and I had to do the B-roll the next day and see the teams out in the morning. And again, when they check in is when they check out. So that ended up being about a 6-hour, 7-hour spread, and then going out and shooting B-roll. And then, I was supposed to fly out the next morning, but I had a crew member who was going home because his team got eliminated and was like, hey, it's our last night in Berlin. Let's go out and party. So that turned into an overnight excursion. And, I ended up running home in the rain to catch my cab to the airport the next morning. So on to the next country, where I was detained in Dubai, very much like an experience that you went through on your latest trip. So I'll save that for another day. But
see, people, he's been in the trenches. These guys know what they're doing here. Jeremy, last question, man. And we ask it almost every interview. How did wrestling change your life? But I love it in the context of business. So if you think back to the early years of starting your business, where maybe you're having some doubts or maybe you're having a tough day, how did wrestling help you through those early business struggles?
Yeah, I would say the big thing for me was just having confidence in myself to get back up if things didn't go my way, if I failed. I do think failure is probably the biggest life lesson. It's the thing you can learn the most from if you choose to. And wrestling gave me the perseverance, the confidence, and the mental toughness to know I'd always be okay. And I'm just going to get back up. I'm going to learn from it. And I'm going to keep going. It allowed me to make that jump to start my own company. And it allows me every day to keep moving forward if things aren't going my way, because you make it through the sport of wrestling on a very high level, collegiate level, you can pretty much go through anything. So it really hardened my mind and allowed me to have confidence in myself to really take on anything.
The self-confidence is huge, and handling failure, it's talked about a lot, but it's just so important. And you guys are a testament to it, man. You're out there doing it, and you're an example to so many wrestlers. So folks, tune into the Angle doc. We'll link to to all the information available on it, and we'll definitely keep everyone posted as some of the projects you're working on continue to progress. And last but not least, Wrestlers in Entertainment, let's get it started. These guys have already, I should say, let's get it going. These guys have already started it, and if you're listening and have any interest, please reach out.
Thanks a lot, Ryan.
Thank you for having us, man.
Have a great one, gentlemen.
You too. Take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Wrestling Changed My Life, presented by Spartan Combat. Be sure to tune in to Angle this Sunday on A&E. For all past episodes, go to WrestlingChangeMyLife.com. Life.com. life.com.